Now comes the fun part. Let's become our site user. So we're going to open a shell as our tutorial Linux user. In your case, that would be your website name, whatever system user you created for your site. You can see we're in the home directory for this user, and we've got those directories which we made, the logs directory and the public HTML directory. We're actually going to create all of our site files in the public HTML directory, and we're going to use a lovely fancy command called wget to download a file. Now we're using wget and then a URL, in this case https wordpress.org, and they have this really nice feature where they just say latest tar gzip always gets you the latest version of WordPress. So we've gone ahead and downloaded that. So we should now have a WordPress or latest targz file in here. Now to unarchive and decompress that, we'll say tar zx for extract f. You could put a v here, but then you'll get output and bandwidth between you and your server will be an issue, so just leave out the v for verbose. We don't care about seeing every single thing scroll by. I'm going to do it just for educational purposes so I can talk about the different files that are being extracted, but this should be the command you run, tar-zxf latest targz. Okay, now that I've told you what to do, don't do what I'm doing, which is add the v. Not that important right now, but for larger archives, this can totally jam up your connection with output, which can take longer to get to you than the actual file takes to unarchive and decompress. Okay, so you can see here, this actually decompresses and unarchives the main WordPress core application directories. That's WP includes, WP content, where your themes and user content like images are kept, and WP admin, which is the admin dashboard, the back end of the site. Those are your three WordPress core directories. We'll talk in more detail about them later. So you can now remove that latest tar-gz, and we're actually going to just get all the files from this WordPress site out into the directory we're currently sitting in. So you could have done this from the home directory and then move the files in here. We're just going to move all the files from the WordPress directory, everything out here to our current directory. So this is move all the files inside the WordPress directory to our current directory. That dot is the shortcut for the directory I'm sitting in right now, which is our public HTML directory. If we do a list all of WordPress, you should see that it's empty, and so we can remove that directory. And now we've got a nice little WordPress install sitting here. Now it's not fully configured yet, but it is sitting here. If you allow a user to have multiple sites, what you would do, and the reason I did this in the public HTML directory, so if a user can have, let's say, 5 WordPress sites, and you don't want to make a new system user for each one of those sites, what you would do is simply move the WordPress directory to the site name directory. But that's once you start growing this hosting platform a little bit, and individual users can have multiple sites. Right now, we're just figuring a single site for a single user, and that makes the example a little bit easier. So at this point, we're ready to actually begin the web-based WordPress setup process. First, we're going to just restart all of our services because we've gone and messed with things, changed the configuration files, etc. So we'll say systemctl restart php fpm MySQL nginx. Make sense? I'm just going to restart all of these. And I have gone and made the silly beginner mistake that I would tell you not to do, but I just totally honestly made this mistake. You have to do this obviously as root. But whatever, I'll leave this mistake in just because it's a good example of different user rights, what a user can do. I am a non-root user right now. I'm just tutorial Linux. I can't restart any system services. It's like way above my pay grade. So hit Control D to get back to your root shell, and the root user can very well do these things. So we'll just go ahead and copy this out. Back on my root shell, I'm just going to run this command again. Systemctl restart php5 fpm MySQL and nginx. Restarting all of my services, and that worked. I should mention just before I had an error actually in my pool configuration file. You won't have this error. I manually went through instead of just like find and replacing all of the instances of your username. I missed the user here. It still said your username, and PHP actually failed the restart on PHP 5 FPM. It failed with an error like cannot find user your username in poolconf. So that kind of error tells you, oh, I need to go check out this file and make sure that I actually changed all of those. Again, you'll use replace the control / functionality here for all of the things that say your site, you'll replace with your site name, and all the things that say your user, you'll replace with your username. But again, I just wanted to point out that mistake because this will happen to you, and I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't happen to me after years of doing this. It still happens. So we've restarted our services. Now we can go and check out our live website. Let's see if that all worked. So when you paste in your server's IP address into a browser, this should actually be hitting your web server, which then hits a PHP page, which goes to the interpreter and tells you, you need to do the first setup. So this will actually give you a web-based wizard, which you can use. Here's the required information. You've got all of this. You don't need to worry about the table prefix. You can go ahead and get these ready from your password manager or wherever you've been storing your database username, password, and that sort of thing. And start the wizard. This is going to create the main WordPress application configuration file called wp-config.php for you. So our database name is actually Tutorial Linux. This will be whatever your site name is, which you created here. Remember this? So this is the database that you actually created. Our database username is also Tutorial Linux. And our user's password is this fancy password tree came up. Localhost, because our MySQL server is actually running locally on our server. If you had a separate MySQL server or MySQL cluster, you would put in the IP address or host name of that cluster or server. And the prefix is fairly unimportant. It's really only if you want to use a single database with multiple WordPress installs. They would all try to create the same table names and you would have a huge mess. It just wouldn't work. You can use a single MySQL database with multiple WordPress sites on it. You would simply change this to something else, like an abbreviated name or something for the site. Don't worry about it now. Hit submit, and you can see that there were no errors. WordPress just tried connecting to that database. So let's go ahead and run that installer. And this will just set up the rest of the things we need in our configuration file. So here we've got an automatically generated password. You can go ahead and copy this if you want. It'll be sent to you in an email. We're going to give the site a title. How about server side? We're going to have a username. And because we're creating a root user, essentially an all-powerful WordPress admin user, we're going to call it secret admin. You'll want some non-public name here. The name of a user who actually won't be creating posts, who won't be visible on the site, because evil script kiddie bots are going to look at all the authors of the site and try to log in as them with randomly generated password or password lists. So if you actually have all of your authors without admin privileges, this increases your security. So you keep a secret admin user account that most of the automated bots simply won't know about. So even if they actually manage to break in using a regular user that's visible on the site, they still will only have regular user permissions. It can be annoying enough, but again, this is just one extra little, not that inconvenient thing you can do to increase security. I'm going to enter my email address here, and you will not want to do this, but I'm doing this because it's just a test site. We're going to discourage search engines from indexing this site. So this will actually just edit your robots.txt file to say no index. For any normal website, you will not want this enabled. Obviously, you want search engines to find you. Go ahead and actually remember this password for now. Go ahead and log in. Let's log into our WordPress site. Hooray! We have a running WordPress site. The first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to update any plugins that are out of date. You might also have a theme that's out of date, something like that. So just if there's anything on the updates tab, just do that as the very first thing. I hope I'm really instilling the paranoia of a sysadmin in you. That's what you should really be getting from this. Okay, so we've got our website set up. You can actually go ahead and visit that website. This will simply open a new tab with your website's front page on it. We're going to learn a little bit about how to administrate a WordPress site, how to create users, unprivileged users, how to do certain things like create posts, pages, add themes, and even create a web shop for free on this site. But for now, this is really the process, which you can repeat any number of times. You can essentially just repeat this process 50 times and have 50 websites now that you've got your foundation set up. The other thing I'd like to add is that all of the steps in this video, and the reason we're separating all of the individual site configuration things into a single video, is so that you can script this one video. If you can turn this into bash scripts or turn it into configuration management scripts like for Chef, Puppet, or Ansible, you can create another site with literally a single line of a command. You can say Ansible playbook run, create site, user, whatever the username is, and you can turn this entire process, which we've just done, into something that takes 15 seconds. So you can use the rest of that time to, drink some coffee or read a book. And that's what system administration is really about. Automating things, saving time, reducing the chance of making mistakes, and having just reproducible, repeatable things where there's a clear process, not having to do everything manually. So I'll see you in the next video where we'll just fine tune a couple things here and look at what we've actually just done. Look at WordPress, look at configuration files that have been automatically set up for us by WordPress, and learn a little bit more about the application itself and how to use it from this. It's called the back end, but it really is sort of still the front end, right? Because this is rendered HTML. The real back end is Nginx and PHP FPM. But the back end of the website is this administration console. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Congratulations, you've got a running web application.